budget position, which I asked members to read. I know when met with a telephone directory-size agenda, things sometimes can get lost, and we wanted to present the information in a transparent way that was easy for members to understand. That tells us a number of things, Mr Mayor. First of all, it tells us that the revenue support grant, which is a central government grant that this council gets, is reducing at a rate of knots. The government's determination is that councils eventually will be self-financing. That presents a particular issue for towns like Oldham, and let's face it, most towns north of Watford will be in the same situation, where we don't raise enough in council tax, we don't raise enough in business rates and other income to be fully self-financing. So when the revenue support grant is reduced to Oldham Council and to councils like us, it puts us in a very, very difficult position. Coupled with that, demand in a lot of places is going through the roof. So we know, despite government figures on job seekers allowance, unemployment is still a big issue in Oldham. And we know that that creates demand in the system that we have to respond to. We also know that nationally procured contracts, like the Work Programme Plus, just is not delivering. So we're backfilling that, and that's creating demand in the system. And of course, the ageing population. That creates a demand on the system, and because we want to treat our older people with dignity and with respect, of course that means that there is cost incurred in doing that. So the message then is of a decline in revenue and increased cost, and that puts councils like Oldham in a very, very difficult position. What makes me particularly angry then is that in spite of all that, and let's be honest, we have handled well the cuts that have come so far. But in some ways, we've done ourselves a disservice. And there are too many councils that have got into a let's just do a good job mentality, that when a budget meeting like this comes, they pat themselves on the back and say, haven't we done a good job? I can tell you, I take no pleasure in moving this report. There is a lot of very difficult decisions in here, and we've got to be honest, it won't be without pain. The view we've taken is, it's better than the alternative. And the alternative is, if Oldham doesn't set its own budget, Eric Pickles and his civil servants will come into town and do it for us. And I can tell you what, they won't have a slightest care about the people in Oldham. So however difficult it is, it's more important that we do it than to allow somebody who is disconnected to Oldham to come into town and do it for us. But then when you see in the news that when we're making people redundant, when we're taking money from services, when at some point we will be saying no to people that come to the council for help, you read taxpayer-owned Royal Bank of Scotland making £8 billion of loss seems quite content at paying £500 million out in bonuses. That's nearly £10 for every man, woman and child handed over to the bankers that created a financial meltdown that means that this council is making the reductions that we're making. Well, that's what the government would have you believe, that the reason why public sector spend is being cut for local authorities is because of the national financial crash that came in 2008. Unfortunately, the evidence tells us a different story. And what the evidence tells us is, for every pound that's been taken from local government, around £1.10 has gone for Department for Work and Pensions and for the acute trusts. Failure demand, people out of work, ill people, where prevention has been taken out of the front line and they're presenting to hospitals. Or older people who aren't being able to be discharged from hospital in the right amount of time are now blocking beds and taking those beds up. And I think government really underestimate how local government is the answer to public service. They forget that the prevention agenda is where we've been at. And actually, when you take that money away, it does add pressure further on. And that's the cruelty of all this, really, Mr Mayor, that every penny that's been taken from the council hasn't gone off to pay the national deficit, and people will take their own view about that. It's actually gone to pay for failure. But there's still a disconnection, isn't there? Because we can have that conversation, and I think the Manchester Evening News did a fantastic job at just articulating where the money was going in two ways. First of all, national distribution of local government spend showed very clearly that although mainly Labour authorities in areas of deprivation we haven't seen a cut, wealthier authorities, generally controlled by Conservative councils, are actually seeing an increase. So money taken from Labour authorities and given straight across to Tory authorities. And the same can be translated through to the fire authority, where money is being taken from Greater Manchester Fire Authority and given to Cheshire. You can translate that through to Greater Manchester Police, where millions are being taken out of the budget, and some of it is going to the City of London Police. There is an active redistribution from poorer areas to wealthier areas. This isn't by accident. This isn't a consequence of a fair settlement and we just ended up on the bad side of that. This is a very determined Tory government, supported, unfortunately, by the Liberal Democrats, that are creating a situation where towns like Oldham are being kicked. But we wouldn't be leaders of the place if we didn't look beyond the council chamber and look at what's going on in Oldham. Don't believe the job seekers allowance numbers. That is not a fair representation of the number of people who are out to work in Oldham. Through universal credit, we estimate up to 2,000 more people are out of work than the government are claiming. We've asked the government, to be honest, to merge the figures so we know the people who we need to help, and they won't tell us. And when we keep demanding, and then they do tell us, it's 3 months out of date, 4 months out of date, which means it's very hard for a town and a council that want to help to get to the people who we're talking about trying to help. We know through welfare reform that families are struggling in Oldham, and that's why we've taken the decision here to freeze council tax. That wasn't easy. Despite what the government say, they have not funded the council tax freeze. They've funded a proportion of the council tax freeze. But we've taken the view that in a town like Oldham, where wages are going down, and they have gone down from about £437 a week to £417 a week, that it would be wrong for us to add more pressure onto those families who are already affected by welfare reform, by the bedroom tax, by council tax localisation, and of course, the increased cost of living. So we hope that people in Oldham see that being good stewards of the public purse in Oldham, we are able to put ourselves in a position where we can help people who need the help the most. Coupled with that, we aren't just about managing decline in Oldham, and I think this has been the trademark that other people have looked on and seen something a bit different. So where other towns are managing decline, are actually quite negative about the future of their place, some actually offering it up as a destitute and a place that's going downhill very fast. We're doing the opposite in Oldham, and we really do need cross-party support for this. The decisions that we are taking to create jobs, to regenerate Oldham, and to deal with the Oldham to-do list, as we call it, need strong stomach. This isn't easy, but it's absolutely essential. The alternative to not investing in Oldham is more unemployment, another generation lost, and a town going downhill when we believe Oldham deserves better than that. And the challenge is there because in the alternative budget, which we'll come on to in a short while, there are some real question marks about whether the group opposite have got the stomach to see regeneration through, or whether you're willing to offer it up as a political pawn. And there's a real challenge there. Are we serious about putting Oldham above politics? Or really, when it comes to the crunch, are we going to go back into the gutter? I don't think people in Oldham would forgive us for that. I think people in Oldham have reflected on Oldham Council and seen that it's matured, that it has taken light of what's going on in the town, and projects, and let's face it, would a council be doing the old town hall and the cinema and the restaurants in another town? In Oldham, it's vital. If we don't deal with the symbols of decline that people can talk about and point to and say, that's why I'm not happy to live in Oldham, that's why my children want to leave Oldham. If we don't deal with that, we have no hope at all of coming out of this recession in one piece. And there is still a recession for towns like Oldham. There might be a boom in London, but they will do given how much public subsidy goes towards London. In towns like Oldham, we're still feeling the ripples of 2008. And while we're here feeling the pain, the bankers are popping champagne in the city, and we're paying them for the privilege. And that's the cruelty of the situation that we're in. But our vision for Oldham, what we're doing with the town hall, the restaurants, the cinema, the hotel and conferencing, they're not just schemes. It's a statement. It's a statement of intent, and it's a statement that says Oldham will be that great town that it once was. It'll be different. It won't be the same. It won't be mills after mills, and it won't be people employed in menial occupations. It'll be different, but we all need to get behind that and to support it. So this budget isn't in itself good news. There's some real terrible decisions that have had to be taken in here, but we've reflected on the alternatives, unfortunately, being worse. We don't want to be in this position. It was not people in Oldham who created the financial mess, but it is us who are picking up the pieces and paying the price. The most important thing, though, is as civic leaders, as councillors who have stood on an election platform and said, people, put your trust in us, that we deliver on that trust. That when the test comes and the cuts have had to be made, we make them, but we don't do that at the cost of creating the Oldham that people demand. I'm very proud to be a member of the Combined Authority. I'm very proud that Oldham really has stepped up to the plate, and I would say we are one of the strongest contributors to that relationship. But I don't want Oldham to be the poor relation. I don't want us to be the low-skilled, low-wage bit of Greater Manchester where people on low incomes live by default. I think we can be better than that. Our point of difference in Greater Manchester is we're the gateway to the Pennines. 70% of our borough in some of the most beautiful parts of England. We should celebrate that. We should be saying to Greater Manchester that we are absolutely the place to invest. But if we don't deal with the symbols of decline and negativity, when the investors come, they'll turn around and they'll leave. Mr. Mayor, I do hope Council will get behind this budget. I do hope people will step back and reflect that even in difficult times, we are given the vision and the leadership that Oldham has needed for such a long time. And I do hope that regardless of the alternative budget that's been set, that when the time comes, cross-party, we get behind what is a budget for Oldham. Thank you.